Okay, I got a dog panting. I've got the washing machine going off right now, and I'm trying again before everybody gets home to make this video. I wanted to talk to you about writing as a pantser and how I set my stories up. Usually a scene plays out in my head and I will write that scene. That is the scene that I give you. So you get exactly what I have seen and heard and felt and tasted and touched and smelled in this scene. And that's what goes on the page. I want to throw you right there in the action because the story has thrown me right there in the action, and that's how it's going to play out. I know that a lot of other authors have a different sort of formula for the way that they write things. I understand that. When you read my stuff, that's just not what you're going to get, because my characters actually kind of talk to me. I sort of become the character. I throw a lot of different human attributes and personalities that I have come across in my life and created these characters. For example, Campbell Fowler is a misogynist. I know men like that. So I created a character like that because he seemed to fit what being the father of Camp would be like. This rich butthole who thinks that women are delicate creatures. Well, I don't think that, but I know men that do, so I wrote him that way. And then as the story progressed in Fire Ridge Pride, you see why he's that way, and that really he's just insecure because he knows that Ignatius is going to kill him if he does something stupid. And then Ignatius does, so there you go. When I wrote Mallory for Thorns Brew, that was the first scene. Excuse my chair creaking. That was the first scene that hit me, was chapter 1. Leaning against the side of the house and the bass thumping against my back. The little sidewalk with the solar lights. It's dark. And Billy and Aspen are in the gazebo. That's the scene that hit me. And describing the characters, what they look like, what they acted like, what they sounded like, and all that sort of stuff. And Jack's coming out, smoking his cigarette. I could see the cherry on the end of it in the darkness. And hear him singing to warn Aspen that it was time to go. Everybody was leaving the party and that they needed to be done. So that's sort of how my writing process goes. And that very first draft, like the one for my work in progress now, which is number 5 of Thorns Brew, was only 560 words. The rough draft, the very rough draft, very first scene that I had. And I will say that I have already started book 6. So that's part of the reason that I can put them out the way that I do, is because some of them are just already written. And for Thorns Brew, trying to write the next series of books that go along with this series is going to have to be centered around the ball that's coming up and the world building that goes along with it, creating different things in each book, and it has to be unique to each couple. So, and Liam is eating a treat. That's what you hear. Well, in creating these things, I have to write all of it. So where I wanted to begin book 5, I can't because it's too much. I have to backtrack and start with Josh. Josh is the better place to start, even though I already have the other stories playing out in my head, because they're all sort of taking place at the same time. So for me, it's kind of like watching this TV show take place. They're living their lives, and I get to see it. And sometimes I will write the flip side of a scene. For example, in Graham, for Glitter on the Lawn, I have the scene for Ian where he's got his forehead pressed against the glass. It's nighttime, and he's staring at his reflection, and he really needs sleep. And the thoughts that are going on in his head, and then him going home because Wallace asked him to. But on the flip side of that, I also have a Finn's version, and I'll put that in my Facebook group. So if anybody wants to read it, when I get done with this video, I'll put that chapter in there just so you can see that that's where Finn came from. When I started to write Mac, I think I have about 10 different versions of how Mac was going to play out. 2 I thought were very, very good. My editors were like, no. So, and that's how I ended up with the version that got published. Because I combined a little, too many genres, I think. I think when you write MM, you got to tone it down a little bit. And I kind of didn't do that. I sort of went more complicated than it needed to be. But that was the story that was playing out in my head. But after I got those 2 written, the story played out in a simpler way. And that's what got published. So sometimes I have to write several different versions just to get to the point that I need to be. And a lot of times, for a lot of the books, I start with that one scene. And that first scene that you get is usually the one that's published, except for Bite Twice. With Bite Twice, the first scene that popped into my head was in the hotel room, motel, with Kian and Camp's laid out on the bed, and his lion is sitting in the chair. That was the first thing that popped into my head when I wrote Bite Twice. So it isn't always, and the washer is going off. But it isn't always the very first scene. But for the most part, it is usually the very first scene that you get is the first one that popped into my head so I could tell the story for this couple. And each book, for all my series, one builds off the next one. So I am, as a pantser, I will start with a little bit of world building. Like, for example, in Loving Aspen, you get they hear thoughts, and bright colors give them a headache, and they can see through clothes if it's bright, but they can't see through the black. So that was just a little bit of the world building going on there. And I didn't bring the dragons into play until Iris. And that was because that's the way it played out in my head. I started off with Mallory and Aspen and Billy and built the story around that, particularly Mallory, this shallow, conceited person who thought he was special, and then sort of bringing him down in Loving Aspen because Aspen did not want to be mean about it. He didn't want to stoop to Mallory's level and publicly humiliate him. But then Mallory does get his comeuppance in another book. So for my current work in progress for Thorns Brew, which is basically 2 or 3 books that I'm currently writing at the time for Thorns Brew, because of the ball scene, and because each one has to view the ball differently. It has to come off differently. It can't be the same scene from someone else's point of view. It has to be a different sort of scene in the same venue at the same time from someone else's point of view, so that it's not boring. And because their lives are playing out differently in my mind. This is their story, and I'm just here to tell it. And that's sort of how my writing process goes. The very first draft for Josh's story started out at 560 words and is currently, let me see, because I am now up to chapter 8 just for Josh, because that's the next one I plan to release after Knox comes out. But there are 1,384 words now in that first chapter. So, big expansion. And after I build the scene, because I did post that scene in the Facebook group, and what you got was Josh showing up for work, not wanting to be there, discovering what Cyrus had done, and then Cyrus trying to kill him. So that's what you got in that first scene. And then I expanded that because Josh has thoughts and feelings, and he's angry, and he's missing out on things, and he's about to be imprisoned. So you have all his feelings about it. Hi, little man. You have all his feelings about it coming into play, but it's not so overwhelming that it doesn't still move the plot. And I don't have the fluff chapters in there that you can skip, because everything has to move the plot along. And that's just the way that I do things. And, ooh, be careful. So that is pretty much my writing process. And I will write the scene out just to develop a character. A lot of times I have to choose a name, and then the personality follows. And very rarely do I get the personality before the name. Usually I get the name first. So it's kind of like they name themselves, and then sort of I become them to figure out who they are. In Sawyer's case, it was I developed him, and then realized when I tried to carry him through other books, he was damaged. And there was nothing I could do about that. No matter how many times I rewrote it, how many times I tried to force it to be one way, it wasn't happening. The characters weren't allowing me to do that, and the story didn't play out that way. Because Sawyer was the catalyst for a lot of things. It helped build the world. And there was nothing I could do about that. I'm very sorry. And just how things go. But yeah, that is my writing process. I will write X amount of words in a day and then email it to myself. And I'll read it on my phone, and I'll read it on my tablet to see where I need to inject things like thoughts and dialogue and fix descriptions so that they actually make sense. Because sometimes I'll write things and then I read it back, and that's not quite exactly the way it was supposed to be. But anyway, like I said, sometimes I have 2 or 3 books going on at the same time. And while I was writing Mac, I was also writing Knox, the easiest thing to do with First Person Limited is write several chapters into another book, just so, because it's all tied together, but you're getting it from a different point of view. And if I have a particular scene that demands a particular outcome and several people are involved, it's easier if I write the scene from the different points of view, so that they don't come off sounding or reading exactly the same. Now, I know that I have done that at least once in the Felidae clan, but the Felidae clan is complex, and there was big information needed there, and I had to say it again. And in the case of Miss Callie, there's a scene in there where she is, oh my goodness, you're just a huffing. Liam's saying hi. But there's a scene in there from Miss Callie where she is fallen into Raven's flesh memory. So we see a scene that we only saw part of in another book. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to flesh that scene out, because I wanted the reader to understand why Raven and Sai needed to be together. So I'm going to have to take this little man potty, but I will get that chapter up for y'all so y'all can see how things went from Finn's point of view, and there'll be some things in there that got cut, but this is just to help you understand my writing process. So if you're not a member of my Facebook group and you want to read these chapters, then go out there and sign up. And also, little man, what was I going to say? He's distracted me and I have forgotten. But anyway, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, and I'll put the links down below for... Hi, baby. Yes, I know. I have to go now. I'll talk to y'all later. Bye.